Well, I suppose you're going down to your daughter Delsey's place to spend Thanksgiving. Is that right, Mr. Nichols?
The old lady who asked the question was seated in Mr. Nichols' best split-bottomed chair. She had a mild-featured old face and wore a false front of auburn hair and a simple bonnet typical of a woman who had spent her entire life in the mountains. However, the answer she got to her question, delivered in a snappy, snarling tone, made her jump nervously. "Ain't nary a chance. I ain't gonna step a foot over there." The words shot out of old man Nichols' mouth as if each one had a charge of powder in its rear, and the speaker went on jerking his pocket knife against the old hickory stick that he was sharpening. He was a squarely built man, and stout as an ox. There was a bright red color in his face, and still a hint of the feisty fire from his youth flashed in his clear eyes.
"Is that right? Well, maybe you'll head up to your brother John's place then,"
ventured the old lady feebly. "Ain't you listening to a single word I'm saying, Miss Lavina? I ain't a-going to John's neither. I ain't going nowheres."
"But," purred the old lady, "ain't you afeard of being awful lonesome? Law, I don't know what I'd do if it wasn't for my Sarah and her children on Thanksgiving Day. At least you could do is go spend it with your daughter Delsey and hers, or your brother John and his."
"Oh, there ain't nary use talking," sputtered Mr. Nichols in a loud, clear-cut voice. "I ain't going to Delsey's on Thanksgiving, and I ain't a-going to John's on Thanksgiving. I ain't even going to have Thanksgiving at all. I ain't got nothing to give thanks for, the way I see it, and I suppose you'll be saying next that I need to go down to that meeting at the Baptist church on Thanksgiving morning and hear that sermon and set down the turkey and plum pudding, and that I ought to be thanking the Lord in my heart for letting my wife fall off of that mountain cliff and getting killed last summer, or for letting my daughter Charlotte die of the fever last spring, or maybe even my son that died 2 years ago this fall. Yeah, I reckon you'd like me to be thankful for that, but I can't, and I ain't gonna be pretending that I do. That's one thing about me. I ain't a hypocrite, and I never was."
"Well, what are you gonna do, Mr. Nichols?"
"Do?" Old man Nichols sniffed. "Do? I'm gonna stay right here and whittle on this stick."
"Law's sake, Mr. Nichols, staying at home all alone on Thanksgiving Day? I ain't never heard anything like it."
"Well, I don't care. Besides, I got pig work that's got to be done, and I might as well just do it on Thanksgiving Day as any other. I'd rather eat pork than eating turkey and plum pudding after all I've been through."
"You mean you ain't going to the meeting either?"
Miss Lavina softly spoke with a tone of realization in her voice. The truth is, old man Nichols would have been too much for her in his best days, and now he almost reduced her to lunacy. Still, this old man was her neighbor, living about a quarter of a mile away, and Miss Lavina was very fond of dropping by every afternoon with a slice of cornbread or apple pie to share. And there wasn't much difference in their ages either. And Mr. Nichols' daughter, who had died the spring before, well, she had been a schoolmate of Miss Lavina's daughter, Sarah. Miss Lavina would typically stay and sit a spell with Mr. Nichols, but today she shortened her call a little bit. The pig work on Thanksgiving Day, well, that rankled her mind, and she wanted to get home to tell her daughter, Sarah. After she had gone, the old man went from his usual spot on the front porch to his cold, exquisitely neat kitchen. And there, he kindled a fire in the cooking stove and poured himself a tall glass of buttermilk. Though he was living alone, every meal was prepared and eaten with religious exactitude. He spread a white cloth over the table as he crumbled some leftover cornbread into his buttermilk. And there he sat, eating like a king in his lonely kingdom. No sooner than he had finished his customary meal when the kitchen door, which led directly outdoors, opened, and a gal of 20 or so years walked in. "Well, how do you do, Lizzy?" said the old man as he wiped the buttermilk from his beard with the sleeve of his shirt.
"Pretty well, Pawpaw,"
replied the girl, listlessly, as she sank down in the nearest chair. She was a tall, slender girl. She had delicate features, and would have been pretty if it had not been for that pitiful droop at the corners of her mouth, and that dullness in her eyes, and dark rings underneath them. "Can I pour you a glass of buttermilk?"
"No, sir, I reckon not. I ain't got much of an appetite."
"Well, I saw young Jack heading over the gap about 3 o'clock, riding with that Hammonds girl," remarked Mr. Nichols, eyeing his granddaughter sharply. But the revelation of this news only seemed to make Lizzy sink further down in her chair.
"Yeah, I saw him."
"Oh, she's a pretty-looking gal. Her cheeks are as red as roses, and she had on a pretty bonnet, too." While every word the old man spoke might have been true, it only caused Lizzy to bury her face in her hands. And, not noticing his granddaughter's despair, the old man carried on as he picked at his teeth with his newly carved hickory toothpick. "It sure has been a long minute since he came to see you. Well, I wouldn't mind anyhow, if I was you," the old man said as he looked at the girl's weary face. And, changing his tone a little, he spoke again. "Let him go if he wants to. Just show him you don't care." But with that statement, the girl woke up.
"Show him I don't care. He knows I care. And it would be a disgrace to me if I'd even care. After all I've been going through with him for the last 3 years. And now he's left me for a new face. It's no use pretending that I don't. I don't see why folks tell me not to care. My heart, it ought to be broken. And it is."
"Well, I'd have more spirit," old man Nichols continued as he leaned back in his chair.
"Well, would you? Well, I'm made different, I suppose."
Lizzy replied as her face took on a listless expression again. And, trying to change the subject, she spoke up.
"Are you coming over to our house for Thanksgiving, or are you going to Uncle John's?"
I ain't going nowhere. I'm going to stay right here and do pig work."
"Pig work?"
"Well, yeah. I'm going to have 'em killed this Tuesday." Her surprise made Lizzy for a minute look like another girl.
"But why, Grandpa? I'd never heard of such a thing. Lord, pig work on a Thanksgiving day?"
Old man Nichols braced himself up defiantly. "Look-a here, Lizzy Monroe. You think you're down as far as anybody can be because you lost that boy you was courting. Well, I lost your grandma that I'd lived with for 40 years. And then I lost my daughter, both of them this year. And 2 years ago this fall, I lost my oldest boy. And I don't see that I've got anything to be thankful for. No, I ain't gonna keep Thanksgiving Day and eat turkey and plum pudding and pretend that I've got stuff to give thanks about." The girl's dull eyes appeared to catch a gleam from her papa's, and for a minute she looked strangely like him. His passionate, defiant nature fired in his granddaughter's more unresisting, hopeless face, and just then she took on the same tone as the old man.
"Well, so that's how it's going to be, huh? Well, in that case, I don't care about eating turkey and plum pudding either. I'll just come over here and help you out with that pig."
Sire Nichols looked startled for a minute. Perhaps his own spirit reflected in another looked differently to him. "Well, Lizzy, just as you like. I'll be glad to have your help. After all, it's a considerable amount of pig work to do alone, and I ain't never been used to it." There was a long silence, and then the girl took her sad face out of the door, and her grandpa, having cleaned the table, went back to his warm sitting room, since the kitchen fire was going out, and it was suddenly growing cold.
Get someone you love the gift of old-fashioned storytelling. 2 volumes packed with stories that'll make your heart smile. Visit theappalachianstory.com to pick up your copy today.
Thanksgiving morning, a week later, was gray and cloudy as the trees, absent of all their leaves, bared their naked souls throughout the hills, and the air felt like snow. Mr. Nichols' kitchen was full of steaming, glowing heat. He had 2 immense iron kettles on the stove and was busily cutting pork into small square bits to try out. Lizzy, too, was there helping. She had come over early Her sad young face looked sadder this morning. The cold, gray light brought out all the pitiful, drooping lines more plainly. She had probably been repentant instead of sleeping the night before. Her hair was pulled back plainly and neatly, since her grief didn't manifest itself in untidiness, though she never crimped her hair now. And after all, Lizzy looked like a totally different girl with her hair crimped. She was cutting pork too. Her wrists, though small, were muscular, and she worked steadily and effectively, though with a pathetic indifference. Papa Nichols' firmly set face betrayed little of it, but he was really eyeing his granddaughter from time to time with furtive uneasiness. "Have you been to see Jenny Tatum lately?" the old man asked, with the desperate determination to alter his granddaughter's expression. But Lizzy quietly shook her head no, and then softly spoke.
Well, Joe hasn't left her, and they're always together, and I can't bear to go over there and see it.
"I know what you mean," her grandpa replied, with a quick, sympathetic recognition of the feeling. "I felt that way after your uncle died in that coal mine collapse. I couldn't bear to go to Miss Mann's place, because there was her son, Edward. Somehow, God had spared his life, and he made it out of that mine, and my boy, he'd been taken." By now, it was about 10 in the morning when there came a knock at the door. "You go get the door, gal. You look better than I do." Lizzy took off her apron and went obediently. This time last year, the excitement of an unexpected visitor excited her. But now, it had been nearly 6 months since Jack had been to see her, and she had given up all hope of his ever coming over again. Papa Nichols heard the doors open and shut, then a murmur of voices in the sitting room. One of the voices was unquestionably a man's low-pitched and earnest voice. Lizzy's seemed to break into sobs now and then, and even once she laughed, and that laugh quickly caught the old man's attention, since it had been months since he had heard it. In fact, he had almost forgotten what his granddaughter's laugh sounded like. "What in thunder is going on in there?" he muttered to himself. But before he could put his knife down, Lizzy reappeared in the kitchen. But was it Lizzy? There was a girl with radiant, peaked cheeks and radiant eyes, and a dimpling mouth.
"It's Jack! Papa, it's Jack!"
The girl spoke in a happy, trembling whisper that she couldn't even attempt to hide. She seemed almost ready to break out into a scream of joy.
"Papa, he came to ask me to go to his house for dinner, and I'm going to go home now. I'm going to get changed and get on my best dress and get ready."
"Lizzy Monroe," her papa started out, "you don't mean to tell me that you're going with that low-down cheating fella after all that's happened and all he's put you through these past 6 months? You mean you're telling me that you're going to play second fiddle for that fella?"
"Yes, Papa, I am. He's come for me."
Great tears of pure delight rolled down her cheeks. She had her bonnet on now, and she turned impatiently towards the sitting room door. "Come for you. I suppose if he'd have got married to that Hammonds girl and come for you, you'd have gone just the same," cried the old man, with a bit of coarse sarcasm.
"Yes, Papa, I probably would,"
smiled Lizzy, recklessly and shamelessly in her happiness, as her hand turned the doorknob. Just then, the old man watched as his granddaughter disappeared happily through the front yard and down the path, hanging on to Jack's arm in broad daylight. "I don't see where she took on such a disposition like that," muttered Mr. Nichols. "Not from my side, I'll tell you that much. I never would have made such a fool of myself over that fella." Then he went on with his pig work, with righteous indignation. It had always been the old man's boast that he wasn't the kind of man who was forever dropping things and getting burned and scalded, or cutting his fingers. Now, though he was a man, he was mightily handy in the kitchen. However, he was to prove on this day that his boasting, for at least one occasion, was in vain. You see, he had lifted the first kettle of boiling lard off the stove and placed it in the sink. The second kettle, though, how he did it, he never knew, whether it was the sudden weakening of a muscle or the slipping of a finger that caused it. But he dropped it after picking it up from the fire, and none of that hot fat went on the stove, where it would have been a much worse complication of disasters. But instead, it had landed on the floor and Mr. Nichols' right foot. And the kettle was so hot it was scorching the floor. You could smell the burning wood. So he lifted it back to the stove and cast a distrustful and indignant glance at the molten grease spreading all over the floor. Luckily, he had a pair of scissors within reach. He sat down and cut off, with convulsive shivers of pain, but grim determination, his boot and sock. But his foot, it was burned all over. He dragged himself in his chair with one foot, hitching himself along to the flour barrel, where he powdered the wounded foot thickly with flour. And he hitched back. Well, I reckon that's all I can do. But the truth was that burn needed lots of salve and bandages and things. But instead, the old man sat all alone in sudden silence. I sure wish somebody would come check on me. And there he sat in silent endurance, in the midst of the grease, which had cooled and formed a white coating over the kitchen floor. His foot was a mass of torture, but he didn't have to wait long for help, since a half hour later, he heard quick steps on the frozen ground outside. "Open the door," called the voice of his daughter, Delcy. "I've got my hands full." "Well, I can't," the old man replied. "You'll have to do it yourself." So the door opened after a second, and there stood Delcy, with a large plate in each hand. She stopped in utter dismay as she took in the aspect of things. Her father, and his floury foot and pale face, and all that lard on the floor. "Well, what have you done, Paul?" she cried. Mr. Nichols looked up, and he actually smiled. It was the first time he'd seen Delcy in many a day. "Well, what have you got there?" the old man asked. "Well, I brought you over some Thanksgiving dinner, but I guess you don't feel like eating any now." "Oh, sure I do. Bring it over here." "But, Paul, you sure you don't want me to do something for your foot?" "No, Delcy, I want it now. I'd rather eat some turkey and plum pudding before I'm an hour older. And looks like the good Lord has been trying to teach me a lesson today about keeping Thanksgiving with my family. And I wouldn't, but the Lord got ahead of me, and I'm powerful glad he has. Bring in here, gal, and I'm going to eat my dinner, and then maybe I can have something more done about my foot." And there, in the floury and greasy mess, the father and the daughter bowed their heads for the blessing and ate their Thanksgiving dinner to the very last mouthful.
Nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to